So I would say the my aha moment this week, I guess, really about the whole class in general. Um, I was really happy about this class. Actually, I learned a lot. Um, I know I was really nervous going in. I probably mentioned it in my first video. Um, every time I hear people talking about millennials, I just brace myself for the conversation of they're the worst thing to happen. Everything was good until this generation came along. This generation is selfish. This generation is shallow. This generation, basically having nothing going for it. Um, but taught me a lot. This class taught me a lot about a balance. Not just about my generation, but now looking back at other generations. Um, I think this class in particular taught me that it's there are going to be negatives that come with this generation, but if you only focus on those and you kind of don't live for the present, you just kind of keep living in the past and complaining about what's happening now, that's not going to get you anywhere. And this is not to say you can't acknowledge the negatives, but to only talk about those or to, base your entire opinion around those, um, I think you start to form a conclusion that's not really based on fact. It's based on um, different factors. And again, this class taught me that you take the influence of, yes, like things like nostalgia. You take the influence of maybe pop culture of their time, how someone was raised. All those factors really taught me what plays into people's perception of modern day or generation text. Um, Another thing I really enjoyed hearing about um, was how much culture influences people. I'm glad we talked about pop culture in an academic light. Again, um, pop culture, it really interests me. I think if it's dismissed, um, it can be harmful just because, as Dr. Oz talked about, which was really nice to hear, is that it has such an impact on people. And, after kind of, thinking about that statement or thinking about those concepts, I realized it myself. I mean, like I said, when I talk to friends, we're mostly talking about pop culture. We'll talk about, oh, I heard this great piece of music, or oh, I read this about a celebrity, or oh, you need to watch this movie, stuff like that. I realize how much it influences my conversation, but I realize how much it also influences my daily life. A big one I can think about for personally for me, and probably for a lot of other people, especially I think it's fashion in the fashion world, which I would consider another part of pop culture, um, or consumer culture. Um, that's where you can see the influence a lot because you see the commercials for different clothing stores telling you what to wear, what's in, um, and I can't help it. I'm not above it. I can't help but get influenced by it. I can't help but wanting to follow certain trends. Um, Another aspect that I really enjoyed in reference to pop culture, I really enjoyed Ozit talking about how to blend the past and the present. Now, while I disagree that I think they're in conflict with each other, I was going to say I can't agree so much there or that there's this tension. Um, because I know when I was reading in past chapters, he gave us kind of a snippet of a millennial describing their interests. Um, and she talked about how a lot about kind of her what would seem like conflicting interests. She was saying, "Oh, um, I kind of, I don't, I like watching The Simple Life, but yet I can also enjoy, like classical music, something like that." Like I said, while I don't agree that there's tension between those, I think that those very much can live together. I am glad Ozit mentioned it. I would expand upon it further and say that that's one of the things that makes this generation so great, is that we have so much access and access to a variety of different cultures. And I think obviously as times advance, I think pop culture has advanced. um, it's expanded into photography or art, or things like that. It doesn't have to be just trashy reality shows and the latest gossip of celebrities about who's dating who. Um, I think it's definitely evolved with millennials. Um, and I also enjoyed Ozit talking about during this class about the identity of it, about youth culture in particular, I would say. Um, because again, just like anyone's youth culture from past generations, this one shouldn't be ignored. Um, Again, if you dismiss it as, oh, they're kids, they're in what they're into, it's whatever, don't take it seriously, then I think you do run into problems. I think there's a little bit of tension because you're basically telling the kid that they're it's just condescending. It implies that their interests are stupid. It implies that, oh, after time you'll forget about this. Oh, it's not that important. Um, I personally think youth culture is so important because I think, obviously young people are wrapped up. That's part of their identity. Um, and I also notice from this class that I can look at mine and say, I can appreciate past ones too. I mean, I think about it. I remember taking a class on childhood in America, and it talked about rock and roll. And rock and roll came out in the 50s, Elvis and things like that. And movies were coming out like Rebel Without a Cause in the 50s as well, and how teenagers, really liked really liked that music and that film, and really clung on to it and started to make an identity for themselves and started to develop a voice for themselves out of pop culture. And I think that's what millennials do here too. Um, and I think what's really interesting about it with millennials now, particularly with millennials, is that since so much time has passed, and there's so many previous, obviously, generations before us, that more than ever, I think pop culture has a better chance to strike this balance between the past and the present, as I had previously mentioned. And again, really enjoyed what Ozzy was talking about. I guess in a way, I see our pop culture as both vintage and revolutionary at the same time, which is really interesting. Um, and the last thing I want to touch on is the technology aspect, because obviously that's been a really huge factor in this class. Um, I really enjoyed, again, hearing both sides of the argument. Um, I personally enjoyed hearing that technology is not going away. It's not a fad. It's definitely here to stay. And as it kind of gives a really good synopsis of, you can either try to fight it constantly, or you can accept it but find ways to make it work for you. And I think that's a really important philosophy to go by when it comes to technology. I mean, I understand that it can swallow people up. Again, we were watching, the articles we read and the documentary we read about or watched about growing up digital. You see these kids obsess over their Facebook or anything like that. I understand that's not healthy. Or you see, on the opposite side, you see parents that are so heavy on monitoring that there's lack of trust being built up, and it causes a lot of resentment. Um, those are some extremes that can really happen with technology, that I understand why people can fear it. However, this class also brought up great points about, while those fears are there, make technology work for you. It's something you can control. Those kids don't have to be glued to the laptop. They can enjoy their Facebook, they can enjoy YouTube, but in moderation. Parents can monitor their kids. Obviously, you want to. They can set appropriate limits, but emphasis on appropriate. You also need to not invade someone's privacy and also be, hovering over their shoulder 24/7. you know, like in the documentary, when what the kids were saying, they understand how to be safe on the internet. They not going to give out their address. They are savvy. They've grown up with it. So I guess in conclusion, this class has been really interesting. I can apply a lot of the various aspects that this class talked about. And I hope everyone else enjoyed this class. Thanks.